It happened so fast, I barely had time to process it. One moment, I was lying on the couch, scrolling through my phone like any other night, and the next, everything went dark. I could feel myself slipping, like the ground beneath me had vanished. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my living room anymore. I was floating above my body, staring down at myself slumped on the couch, my phone still glowing faintly in my hand. Fear clawed at me. I tried to scream, to move, but I was frozen, trapped in this strange, weightless void. And then a light, blinding, brilliant, and unlike anything I'd ever seen, pierced through the darkness. It wasn't just light, it was power, and with it came a presence so overwhelming that my heart felt like it would burst. What I saw next shook me to my core. It wasn't just a vision, it was a warning. A warning about the future of Christianity, a future that might already be unfolding before our eyes. Please, stay with me as I share what happened, and why I believe you're meant to hear this. It might just change the way you see everything. It was just another Friday night, nothing special. I'd finished my homework earlier that day and had nothing planned, so like usual, I grabbed my phone and fell into the endless scroll. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. I couldn't stop. Hours blurred together as video after video kept me hooked. It wasn't like I had nothing else to do. It's just that this felt easier. Honestly, it had become a habit. I'd scroll until my mind felt numb, like I could just tune everything out. Part of me knew it wasn't healthy. Sometimes I'd even feel this twinge of guilt, like I was wasting time I'd never get back. But I'd push that thought aside and keep scrolling. After all, what else was there to do? That night wasn't any different, at least not at first. My parents had already gone to bed, and the house was quiet. My siblings were in their rooms, and I was alone with nothing but the glow of my screen to keep me company. The silence should have been comforting, but it wasn't. Then it happened. A strange dizziness came over me, like the walls around me were tilting and spinning. I thought, maybe I've stared at this screen too long, or maybe I just need water. I tried to get up, but before I could move, everything went black. What came next would change everything. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my living room anymore. I was somewhere else, somewhere that didn't feel real. The air around me shimmered with an unnatural glow, and I could see screens floating everywhere, phones, tablets, TVs, even virtual reality headsets, all glowing faintly, like they were alive. At first, it was eerily quiet, but as I looked closer, I noticed something horrifying. Faces stared back at me from the screens, millions of them. But their eyes were blank, lifeless, like they were trapped in a trance. It sent chills down my spine. Then, the silence shattered as a brilliant light filled the void. So intense, I had to shield my eyes. My heart raced as I turned to see where it was coming from, and that's when I saw him. Jesus. But he wasn't like the paintings I'd seen in church or the stories I'd imagined as a kid. He was radiant, more powerful and real than anything I had ever experienced. His presence wasn't just light, it was love, mixed with a weight of authority so overwhelming, I felt like I couldn't move. He looked at me, his expression a mix of sorrow and urgency, and then he spoke. "Come," he said, extending his hand. His voice was calm, but it carried a power that made my whole being tremble. As soon as I took his hand, the scene around me changed. The screens that had floated harmlessly before now pulsed with a dark energy. Chains stretched from each device, snaking through the void and latching onto people. These chains weren't ordinary. They were glowing with sinister words etched into them. Envy, anxiety, pride, distraction, lust. I gasped, horrified as I realized what I was seeing. The chains weren't just holding people, they were controlling them, binding them so tightly that some could barely move. "They don't even realize they're chained," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Jesus' face was heavy with sadness. "This is how the enemy works," he said. "These screens are not just tools. They have become weapons, enslaving hearts, minds, and souls." I looked closer, and that's when I saw it. The glowing symbols from the chains weren't just on the devices anymore. They had begun burning into people's foreheads and hands. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice trembling. He looked at me, his expression more serious than ever. "This is only the beginning," he said. "The enemy is preparing them. He's training their hearts to accept what's coming, to value convenience and approval over truth, to worship what is easy instead of what is eternal." His words hit me like a wave, and suddenly I thought about my own life. How many hours I had wasted staring at my phone, letting it define my worth. How often I had ignored what truly mattered. I wanted to cry, to beg for a way to stop it, but I didn't know how. The chains, the screens, the empty faces, it was too much. "This is the battlefield," Jesus said, gesturing around us. "And your generation is at the center of it." Before I could even process what Jesus had just told me, the scene shifted again. Suddenly, I was standing in the middle of what looked like a war zone. But there were no guns, no explosions. This battle was different. On one side, I saw families, parents, grandparents, children, and teens. But they weren't fighting together. They were fighting each other. The older generations shouted at the younger ones, accusing them of being lazy, selfish, and addicted to their devices. The younger generations yelled back, blaming their parents for the mess they were in, for not understanding, for creating these problems in the first place. And in the shadows, I saw him, the enemy. He was there, watching, laughing, feeding off the chaos as families tore themselves apart. It was like he didn't even need to lift a finger. We were doing his work for him. Jesus' voice broke through the noise, filled with sorrow. "They are supposed to be united," he said, "but the enemy has turned them against each other. Parents fight their children instead of fighting for them. Children resent their parents instead of honoring them. He has sown division where there should be love." Tears burned in my eyes as I watched the scene unfold. I saw myself in the younger generation, arguing with my parents about things that didn't even matter. I thought about how many times I dismissed their advice, how many times I chose my phone over spending time with them. "What can they do?" I asked, desperate for answers. "They must pray," Jesus said. "They must teach my word, and they must set an example by seeking me above all else, even their own distractions." As he spoke, the scene shifted one last time. I was standing in a church, but it wasn't like any church I'd ever been to. The sanctuary was full of people, but most of them weren't paying attention. Some were scrolling on their phones during worship. Others were taking selfies during the sermon. The pastor's voice echoed through the room, filled with passion and urgency, but it was like no one could hear him. The glow of their screens lit up the pews like artificial light, drowning out the warmth and presence of God. "This is my house," Jesus said, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow. "But it has become a marketplace for distractions. My people no longer seek me with their whole hearts. They seek entertainment, validation, and convenience." His words pierced me. I felt ashamed, not just for myself, but for all of us. How many times had I sat in church, half listening while checking my phone? How many times had I been distracted when I should have been seeking him? I turned to Jesus, tears streaming down my face. "What can I do?" I asked. "I'm just one person. I'm just a kid." He placed his hand on my shoulder, and for the first time, I felt the weight of his love and his trust in me. "You are more than you think you are," he said. "You are my messenger. Warn them, not just your generation, but all generations. Tell them what you have seen. Time is short." His words settled on my heart like a fire. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew I couldn't stay silent. This wasn't just a vision, it was a mission. I woke up gasping for air, my heart pounding as if I'd just run a marathon. My living room came back into focus. The couch, the soft glow of the lamp, the silence of the night. My phone was still in my hand, but something about it felt different now. It wasn't just a device anymore. It felt heavy, almost sinister, like I was holding a piece of the chains I had just seen. Tears started streaming down my face. I couldn't ignore the weight of what I had just experienced. That vision wasn't just for me. It was a warning for all of us. I dropped my phone on the floor and fell to my knees, crying out to God in a way I never had before. I prayed for my family, my friends, my generation, and even the people I'd never met who were caught in the same traps I had been blind to for so long. The next morning, I knew things had to change. The distractions, the endless scrolling, the excuses, they couldn't take priority anymore. Jesus' words echoed in my heart. "You are my messenger." And even though I didn't feel ready, I knew I couldn't stay silent. I started with small steps, putting down my phone more often, spending time in prayer and reading His Word. I began talking to my family about what I had seen, about the chains, and how we've let the enemy creep into our lives without even realizing it. It wasn't easy. Some people listened, others didn't. But I kept going because I knew the message wasn't mine to keep. And now I'm here, sharing it with you. I know this might sound extreme or even hard to believe, but if this story resonates with you, don't ignore it. Look around you, at your own life, at your family, at how we've all become so caught up in things that don't matter. Pray for your loved ones, for the people in your life who might be trapped in ways they don't even see. Jesus showed me the truth, and now I'm sharing it with you because our time is short. But there's hope. There's always hope when we turn back to Him. If you've made it this far, I want to leave you with this. The enemy is working overtime to distract and divide us. But Jesus is calling us to wake up, to come back to Him, to fight for each other instead of against each other. This vision changed my life, and I pray it changes yours too. It's not too late to break the chains, to set aside the distractions, and to seek Him with your whole heart. The choice is ours, and I hope we choose Him.